If you're struggling to find sustainable materials for your clothes, this video will help you do just that. Let's dive in. My first tip to find sustainable materials for your garments is to leverage your design team. Your design team should have the expertise and the knowledge to suggest what types of materials would work best for the garments you want to make. Remember that I always say you want to collaborate with your design team. So you're going to tell them who your ideal customer is. So who is ideally going to be wearing this garment and who are you trying to target? What pain points are you trying to solve with this garment? Because remember, we are not just making product for the sake of making product anymore. We need to be intentional. And then of course, what the use case for the garment is as well. And based on all those things, I'm sure you have an idea of how you want the garment to drape, feel, how you want it to look like. And so communicate that and really make sure you collaborate with your design team so that they understand and then they can suggest what materials might work best. So for example, they may say that cotton or organic cotton would be best, or maybe hemp or tencel or silk. Whatever it looks like, based on your goals with this garment and what you want to achieve out of it, your design team should be able to give you that first step and really make sure you lean on them and you trust them and you collaborate with them. If you need tips on how to hire a designer and gather an all-star design team, make sure you watch my previous video on how to design a clothing line, even if you don't have a fashion background, because it's going to be really helpful for you and I shared a lot of tips in that video. Once you have an idea of what materials you're looking for, my next tip is to treat it like a numbers game, because that's what it is. And for your information, a lot of materials are housed and sold by companies called mills. So you're going to need to gather a list of all these different mills so that you can find the best possible material and the most sustainable material out there for you and for your brand. Know that finding a good mill and a good material takes time. You need to do your due diligence. And so don't go into this thinking that you're going to be able to find a great material in just 2 weeks or something like that. Because if you're not working with us and we're not warm introing you to mills and materials that are trusted, then you really want to make sure that you put in the time, the effort, and the resources required to ensure that you find the best possible material for your garments. So in order to help you, I have a few tips. First of all, you want to set up either a Google spreadsheet or an Airtable form. And at Recloseted, we love Airtable because it really is such a game changer. It's basically spreadsheets to the next level. You can slice and dice information, present it in certain ways. But regardless, you need some sort of system to house all this information because you're going to be doing a lot of researching, you're going to be gathering a lot of data, and you want to make sure that you can summarize it and you can pick the best material possible for you. Once you have started your spreadsheet, either on Google or on Airtable, what you're going to do to try to populate and find materials in mills are 4 different things. First of all, you're going to leverage your network, meaning that anyone in the fashion industry or friends of people in the fashion industry, you're going to ask them if there's any materials or mills that they would recommend. Ask this respectfully because traditionally, the fashion industry has been really secretive around where they do their production, where they get their materials, and so some people still might be hesitant, but the industry is trying to become more transparent and more sustainable, and so nowadays, people are a little bit more open to sharing things, especially if they've had a bad experience, so just ask around. It doesn't hurt to ask, but of course be respectful. And then my next tip is to make sure you search online for any mills and materials as well. Just a quick Google search will go very, very far and help you populate your list. Building on top of searching the interwebs, you can also leverage Facebook or LinkedIn groups. These are also great resources to find mills and materials, and you can just simply post in these groups and say, you're looking for X material, X type of fabric, does anyone have any leads or can anyone help you? And that goes quite far as well, because remember that we're casting a wide net because this is a numbers game. And my last tip is to leverage a sourcing site. These are magical because as a brand, you can usually post on these sites for free. And essentially kind of like a job posting site. So what you're going to do is you're going to go onto these sites, you're going to write a really clear description on the type of material you need, and then mills will just pitch themselves to work with you, and you'll get an inbound inquiry and an inbound list, all these different materials and mills that you could potentially work with that can then populate your spreadsheet. So this is really awesome, but my one tip for you here is just to make sure that the posting that you put up on these sites is really specific and you provide as many details as possible. That way, folks can self-select and they can really see if this would be a fit for them. So what I mean by that is just making sure you're clear with what material you're looking for, obviously. You also want to talk about the quantities you want to order as well. So if you're a smaller brand and you don't want to hit really, really high minimums or really, really high MOQs, then just be particular and specific around what that looks like. And then of course you want to think about pricing, lead times, colors, all those different things. So put that all into your posting and watch the magic come in, because people will pitch and then you can populate that all into your spreadsheet and start to narrow down what mill and what material you may want to use. And so as you're casting a wide net and as you're treating this as a numbers game, to stay organized, you're going to leverage your spreadsheet. And I'm going to take it a step further and tell you exactly what you should be having in your spreadsheet so that we can stay on top of it and find the best possible material for your brand. First of all, you want to have the name of the mill, so the company that is providing the material. You also want to have the type of material, because sometimes your fashion designer or fashion design team may say that there's a few materials you can test out, so you just want to make sure you can have all that information so you can easily organize it. You then also want to have more information about the mill, so the location, the website, the person you're in contact with, their name, their phone number, their email, just all the contact info. And then from a material perspective, you want to note anything like, how heavy it is in terms of like the fabric thickness. You also want to note anything like colors. You of course want to make note of pricing, any MOQs and minimum order quantities. That will be very helpful for you to know. And then you also want to take into account lead times as well, because sometimes there's some materials that mills will have on hand all the time because it's one of their really popular or regular materials. But in other cases, there might be fabrics where it's a seasonal thing or it's a special type of fabric, and if they're out, it's going to take a really, really long time to order. So you just want to make note of that. And then I always like to tell our clients to have a status column as well, so that they can really keep organized around who they've contacted, who they've vetted out that's just not going to be a right fit, who they think is actually going to be a right fit and they want to ask for samples or swatches, and what then becomes their top 3 or top 5 fabrics. So make sure you stay organized. You can again leverage Google Spreadsheets or Airtable. We have a free link down below for you to try out Airtable, and this is not sponsored. Airtable really helps keep us sane, and we also leverage our Airtable templates and share them with our clients so that they can stay organized as well. If you're getting a lot out of these tips, you're going to love my free launch masterclass. This is 60 minutes of me teaching directly to you, and you're going to get so much out of it. I'm sharing 3 secret strategies. The first one being how to find an amazing designer, how to design your first collection, even if you don't have a fashion background. So we're going to dive deep into that. Secondly, you're also going to get our proven system on how you can find sustainable materials and amazing ethical manufacturers. We're going to go deeper than what I've shared on YouTube before. And then last but not least, you're going to get our tried and true system on how you can build a community from scratch so that when you launch, it's not just crickets and you actually launch, people buy things, and that's how you can make at minimum $20,000. Don't miss out on this masterclass. Spots are first come, first serve. And so if you want to get more info and save your spot, you can go to recloseted.com/masterclass. The link will also be in the description, and don't snooze, because once we are full, and you don't want to miss out. I am not holding back at this masterclass, so make sure you sign up if you haven't already. And now let's dive back into the video. My next tip is that you can potentially leverage dead stock fabric. And I say potentially because there is nuance, and I'm going to empower you with all the information you need to decide if this is the right choice for you. But before I do that, I'm going to overview what dead stock fabric is, just in case you don't know. So dead stock fabric is essentially surplus fabric that wasn't used to produce clothing. Think of it as a bigger brand. They bought lots and lots of fabric because they thought they were going to produce X amount of clothes, but it turns out that they don't need all of it. And so instead of that going to landfill, a smaller brand can now come in and purchase that leftover piece of fabric for a cheaper rate. And then the argument is that it's diverting from landfill, and the smaller brands usually get it at a cheaper price point, and they don't need those huge quantities. And so it can be a great win-win situation. There is nuance, and we will talk about that. But that being said, that's high level what dead stock fabric is. And in the purest sense of it, and in the most sustainable sense of it, it would be just big brands having surplus fabric and then smaller brands purchasing it. But there are instances where there's a reason why big brands don't use those fabrics. It's either not high quality, it's either damaged, etc., etc. And so if a small brand doesn't know that and they purchase it, it can actually lead to problems during production or when the customer is wearing it. So you just want to make sure you test everything and you know what's going on. With all that being said, there are pros and cons when it comes to dead stock fabric. And additionally, there is a little bit of controversy around the topic. There's some people that love it, there's some people that say it's greenwashing, and with anything and everything that's related to sustainability, I always say that it is not black and white. Something is not always good and something is not always bad. It depends on your reasons, how you do it, and based on your values and your situation, dead stock fabric might be the best solution for you. Or alternatively, it could be a really bad solution for you as well. And so it really depends and there's nuance. And I think that people really don't like the complexity of that and they can't sit in that, but just take the time to really evaluate if dead stock fabric would work for you. And I'm going to overview the pros and the cons so that you are empowered to make that decision for you. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Susie thinks about dead stock fabric or what Anna thinks about it. It matters if it's aligned with your values and your brand's values. So with that being said, let's dive into the pros. First of all, I mentioned this a little bit already, but in most situations, and I'm definitely an optimistic person, so we're gonna say in most situations, dead stock is diverting from landfill, which is great. Because a lot of brands will tend to overestimate how much fabric they need, and then with the excess fabric, now it's not going to landfill, it's being used. We talked about that. The other thing as well that we mentioned is that prices are usually friendlier for smaller brands when it comes to dead stock fabric. That being said, there are some dead stock fabric providers that also jack up prices and make sure that they have healthy margins for themselves, which is fine. You know, you need to do what you need to do in business, but you just want to make sure that you're not getting ripped off. You want to make sure you ask questions about why things are priced a certain way, but generally across the board, dead stock fabric does tend to be a little bit more accessible to smaller businesses. And then last but not least, there's also lower requirements in regards to MOQs or minimum order quantities. And for dead stock fabric, there's usually a limited amount of fabric left anyways. It's not, yardage and yardage or meters and meters of this fabric. And so you don't have to be under the pressure of trying to hit this minimum order quantity or this fabric amount that you need to order in order to get your hands on it. So that can be really helpful for a startup small brand as well. And there's also cons with dead stock fabric as well. First of all, there's a big argument that people are saying that the practice of having dead stock fabric available for sale afterwards actually encourages overproduction from fashion brands and also from mills, because they just know that if they make it, they're going to be able to sell it. And usually making more equals more sales. Unfortunately, that's just the business model that the fashion industry operates in. And that's just how the industry works. And so unfortunately, we're just cogs in a bigger machine and you just need to do what's best for you and your brand. So if you need to use dead stock fabric and you found a really high quality dead stock fabric piece and you love it and it's gonna work and you're getting, backlash or questions around it, I would just communicate that, because of pricing, because of MOQs, because you're a small brand, that's why you've done what you've done. And of course, every single situation is nuanced and different, but stand firm to your decisions and know why you're making them. That's why for all of our free resources, we aim to empower you with the knowledge so that you can go out and then make the best possible choice. The second con is that you may not know exactly what this fabric is. Because sometimes if it's donated or just randomly dropped off, there's not a lot of information about what it is. And yes, you can guess that maybe it's a cotton jersey or it's silk or whatever it is, but you may not know unless you test the fabric, and that costs money. And so you just have to be okay with that. And that being said though, that goes into the third con, which is around product quality and kind of quality control in general. Sometimes there's a reason why these brands aren't using this fabric. And so you just want to make sure that you're comfortable with the quality of the fabric and you can test it, you can really make samples out of it, really make sure you're comfortable with it and you love it before moving forward. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be making products that are going to fall apart after 5 wears or something like that. Right? That's just not sustainable and that's not intentional at all. So make sure you do your due diligence. And with all that being said, I know that there's a lot of information, there's a lot of caveats here, but at the end of the day, know that based on what you're making and also your values and your brand's values, this might be a really good option for you, or this might not be. And I wanted to give an example of a client of ours that does a lot of outdoor wear and a lot of more like technical wear. One of the founders' main wishes was to try not to use virgin synthetic materials, so like virgin polyester or new polyester, because it uses a lot of petrochemicals. It's not great, and then at the end of life it's also not great as well. So she found a middle ground through using deadstock. However, she had to spend so much time finding these fabrics because her pieces need to still be really long lasting and intentional and high quality because it is more technical. So with that being said, she was willing to put in the time and the effort, but in your case, if this resonates with you and you're in a similar situation where using new materials for your garments just doesn't feel great, then this could be a good opportunity and a good alternative for you. So that being said, potentially use deadstock fabric, evaluate if it's for you or not, and if it is, that's amazing. If it isn't, that's amazing as well. Make your business decisions based on what you think is best and ignore the noise. I know there's always so much back and forth around a lot of these topics in sustainability, but like I mentioned, there is gray and there is no black and white answer. So be comfortable in the uncomfortable. This is just one of those many business decisions where you need to do what's right for you. Once you have a solid list of materials and mills that you're happy with and you've populated them into your spreadsheet, the next step is really to vet those materials and start to narrow down which one would be the perfect fit for you. I've heard so many horror stories, and I know you likely have as well, just around fake certifications, really poor quality materials, things falling apart, and I do not want that to happen to you. So take the time, take the effort, and take the resources required to do your due diligence and really vet through everything. And so what you're going to do is, for your whole list of mills and materials, you're basically going to go through a very vigorous interview process. And here are some questions you want to ask. First of all, you want to ask about material composition. So what is actually in this material? Usually it'll be listed right on the website, but if it's not, you just want to make sure you get in contact with them, you ask them, just so you know. Secondly, ask for any certifications. If this is applicable, then amazing, make note of the certification, and that can really help with your vetting process. And if they don't have a certification, that's not necessarily a red flag, because sometimes some smaller mills are essentially small businesses as well, and they don't have the funding required or maybe the time or the resources to actually apply and get a certification. So just because they don't have a certification doesn't mean that they're not up to standard or kosher. It could be a matter of not having the money, not having the time and the resources to get it. However, on the flip side, there's of course situations where things aren't kosher and things aren't going well and it's not going according to plan, and that's why they're not getting their certification. So you just want to make sure you do your due diligence and you know what's going on. And a lot of the times, if you just simply ask why they don't have a certification and you talk to them about it and get them to explain, you can really see what's going on. Additionally, you want to ask about pricing. So get really clear on how they charge, when they charge, how much they're going to be charging you, and just make sure you are all over that so that there's no surprises. And then additionally, you want to make sure you ask about minimum order quantities, or MOQs, because you just want to know how they calculate that as well. There's instances where, past clients, before they started working with us, thought a mill was only needing, let's say 100 yards of fabric, and it was by color and not just by fabric type, so just making sure you ask if it's by fabric, is it by color, like how do they calculate all of that, so that it is not going to come back and haunt you later on. You want to make sure you have all that information from the get-go. And then, of course, last but not least, lead times. So if they don't always have this fabric on hand and it's not one of their staples or regulars, then if the fabric runs out because someone else has bought a huge quantity, or you just run out because your products are flying off the shelves and you need to do another order, if they don't have it in stock, how long is it going to take them to get it? That's information you also want to have on hand as well. And throughout this entire process, just trust your gut. If something feels fishy or seems off, it probably is. And I know that trusting your gut is, again, not black and white, it's very gray, but it's very important to do that, because sometimes in instances there's things you just can't put your finger on, but you feel like it's off. And so just walk away in those situations, make note of it in your spreadsheet or in your information for your files so that you know in the future as well. And I cannot stress this enough, If you're not getting a warm intro from us to our trusted mills and materials, you need to do your due diligence and put in the time, the effort, and the resources required to really thoroughly vet everyone to ensure that you find an amazing mill to partner with and amazing materials for your garments. So please, please, please vet everyone thoroughly. I don't want you to be in those really uncomfortable and tricky situations where clothing is falling apart or it's not high quality. So please do your due diligence. That is so important. In addition to vetting your materials, my next tip is to also do quality control and test these materials out. So once you have your list, you've vetted them and you've narrowed it down maybe to your top 10 or top 20 materials, you then want to go out and ask them for swatches or samples of fabric. You don't necessarily want to do that with everyone just because a lot of these mills are small businesses and they send out fabric and swatches for free and it's a cost to them. So you want to make sure that you do it with the fabrics that you're serious with. And what you just simply do is you ask for swatches or fabric samples of the materials you're interested in and they will literally just mail it to your house. It's amazing. And so I really recommend you do that so that you can touch and feel the fabric. And so I have some examples here. Sometimes they'll send cards and they're really small swatches, and I'll give you an example. I feel like a beauty YouTuber. Hopefully that's in focus. And then sometimes you'll have a lot of different variety as well. Like they'll send you a lot of different swatches. And the point is that you can touch and you can feel everything and you can see what's going on. And when it comes to actually playing around with your swatches, you want to be rough with it. So really test it out, meaning, you stretch it, you pull at it, see what happens. And then also, once you are happy with it, you want to wash it as well. And so even if it's a beautiful silk, like what I have here, you want to make sure that you do anything and everything a potential customer would do. So that means hand washing on cold, hand washing on warm, putting in the washing machine, doing like all sorts of wild stuff. And add the wild stuff towards the end so you don't ruin the fabric swatch, but you want to start to just understand what the material can go through so that you can of course put the care instructions on, and usually the mill will have suggestions as well, but you just want to know what can happen, because honestly you could say something's dry clean only if it is, and someone will still magically throw it in the washing machine. And so you want to be prepared and you want to know what will happen. And with that being said, sometimes it is hard to test with small pieces of fabric because this is a really small swatch and you may not get a lot out of it. And so what I recommend is for your top 10 or top 20 materials, you've gotten the swatches, you've gotten the fabric samples, you've played around with it, you've tested it. So with that, you're going to probably narrow it down further to maybe your top 5 or even your top 3. And that's when you're going to ask and really pay for more meters or more yardage. So you can actually order larger pieces of fabric. And I also recommend eventually making samples out of the fabrics as well, so that you can really see how it's going to drape and really see what your designs are going to look like. And so you're going to order larger pieces of fabric, and that segues into my next tip, which is to make samples. So once you have narrowed it down maybe to your top 3 fabrics, you're then going to go out and actually make the garments in these different types of fabrics and see which one you like the best. It's one thing to touch and feel fabric and swatches, but it's another to actually see it in finalized garment form. And then you can see if it's what you thought in your head, if it's actually coming to life. And so really highly recommend that. And with this entire process, make sure you're interlocking and communicating with your design team as well. Get your design team's opinion too. Do they like working with this fabric? Do they think it's going to be high quality? Do they think it's going to be long lasting? All these different things. And once the samples have been made and you're testing it, you also want to ask yourself, is this how I want it to feel on the skin? Like, is it supposed to be soft? Is it supposed to be more structured? Like, what does that look like? And then of course you also want to test the quality. So if it's, for example, a legging and you're doing athletic wear, then do squats in it, go for a run, go to the gym, see if it's going to hold up. So really make sure you test the garment and the fabric as well and go through that rigorous exercise and put in the time and the effort to do so. And those are my tips. If you watched until this point, comment, I'm going to find a sustainable material in the comments so that we can cheer you on and you can speak your success into existence. Friendly reminder that I am hosting a free 60-minute launch masterclass. I am not going to be holding back. It's going to be strategies in this video, but to the next level. We're talking all about designing, sourcing materials, sourcing manufacturers, and how to set up your marketing so that you launch successfully and there's not crickets when you launch. So make sure you sign up if you haven't already. The link to do so is recloseted.com/masterclass, and it's also in the description box for you. Beyond the masterclass, we also have an amazing ebook. It details my launch method formula, which allows our clients to go from idea all the way to successful 20K launch. Before the masterclass happens, feel free to download this ebook. It talks about a lot of things that I outlined in this video, but also many other things like what types of products you should design, how to design them, how to set up your marketing, all those different things. And there's exercises and worksheets for you. So you can also download that at recloseted.com/launch, and make sure you do so. It's so jam-packed with value, so make sure you check it out. With that being said, amazing job. I am so honored to support you on your entrepreneurial journey, and together, let's transform the harmful fashion industry.